Welcome back. The Space Force has a new capstone document that lays out the plan for military operations in space. It spells out the force's priorities for defending the United States. In space, Colonel Casey Beard's commander of Space Delta 9 in the Space Force. He's one of the architects of the framework. Colonel, welcome. Thanks very much for coming on. What was the process that you and your colleagues undertook to create this document?
Good morning, and thanks for having me. So the process was about a year in the making. It began summer of last year, 2019. There were about 21 of us, 22 of us, I should say, including myself, rallied the team with the motivation of generating a document that would articulate, for the first time ever, space power as a military form, distinct form of military power. We wanted to make sure that was captured in advance of a potential service. At the time, the Space Force didn't exist. We wanted to have a document knowing that the Space Force could be imminent that would shape the purpose, identity, and culture of this new entity, this new military organization, as it fit into the rest of the joint force. And we also believed that this service, the most important contribution this service could make in its early stages of existence, was this articulation of space power to demonstrate how it fits into the larger joint community. And so, again, myself and 21 others started meeting together at the Pentagon and had virtual touch points around the country and met about every 2 weeks, had an opportunity to debate, to pontificate, to then assign sections of the document, drafted it out, and then coordinated it through a series of senior mentors who were great in their support. And it raised to the level of interest here at Peterson Air Force Base with General Raymond and his staff. We were able to brief this concept to them. They adopted it as the foundational doctrine that they would use to formally court and then ultimately produce what we see today. So it was a team effort. A lot of highly skilled, highly energized individuals, experts in the mission area, who came together really on our own accord and had a great support network and empowerment from our leadership team, who ultimately produced it. And that's what we have today.
You've described this, Colonel, as a coalition of the willing. Where did those 22 voices come from? Did they come from inside the Air Force at the time, since, as you said, there was no Space Force when you began this? Or did they come from space operators from all over the other branches of the military, too?
Yeah, so it was a joint endeavor, predominantly Air Force space operators, but we did have Army personnel, we had civilian personnel, we had background from the intelligence community, and all facets of space operations. Predominantly, our personnel were from the Pentagon or the D.C. area, but again, we had support networks all across the country.
You have 3 cornerstone responsibilities, 5 core competencies, and 7 space power disciplines. And General Raymond and others have said that this will provide kind of the platform for other doctrine documents for Space Force. How so, Colonel?
Yes, so when we look at this doctrine document, and capstone being the key word here, it's foundational. It identifies the purpose, the identity, and the culture of the organization itself, of the Space Force. So now with those responsibilities, competencies, and disciplines, as you mentioned, that sets the framework for the next level, subordinate level doctrine, operational and tactical doctrine, when we can start applying those concepts and tying them into specific systems, specific operations, training requirements, standards, et cetera, to be able to execute and implement those ideas real world and day to day.
What do you do next? What do you do moving forward to build those doctrine documents?
That's right. So now that we have this on the street, it's now public and it's usable. The next steps are to formally start to generate writing teams that will start transitioning over to the LeMay Center, which is the Air Force Doctrine Center down at Maxwell Air Force Base, and start drafting up operational level doctrine, personnel doctrine, et cetera, and doing the same process almost that we've seen here with this capstone doctrine, and having those published notionally within the next year or so. Now, long term, the Space Force has been forward-leaning and anticipating the need for this type of a process. So we're also looking to establish what we call the Space Training and Readiness Command, STARCOM, in the future that would actually own this process organically, rather than having to rely more exclusively on the Air Force or other services to do that.
How do you and others in the Space Force want the men and women who will be on the front lines of that force to implement this document, to execute on this and the other doctrine documents that you put out moving forward, Colonel?
That's right. So first and foremost, it's to have that, and I have a copy with me on hand, to have one of these documents on your person at all times, to be able to read it, digest it, debate it, and then apply it as you mentioned. So it's to understand, where do I fit in the core competencies? What is the discipline that I bring, the skill set that I bring to that? And as I apply it, is this properly communicating and shaping the operations in a way that's worthwhile? And if it is, great, we'll continue to elaborate on that and build on that. If not, we'll have the mechanisms in place to provide a feedback loop up to the writing team to say, this is a better way to do business. We have discovered something in the field that may not match exactly with what was originally published. Let's get that right. Let's refine it. Let's validate it and get it out to the force for future implementation.
You kind of allude to where I wanted to go next, and we just have about 30 seconds left, but I wonder, is this a living document, or is this something, you've got a hard copy there, that's fixed at least as far as the one you carry around, but is this a living document, Colonel? Will this change as time goes on?
It absolutely is. And the fact that it's the inaugural document means that it will probably change more frequently in the early years than it will in the out years. Over time, we do establish, or we would expect this to establish itself in a more long-term trajectory, maybe every 3 or 4 years modification. But I certainly expect this to be rapidly developed and improved, again, using empirical evidence now from the field to make sure that our mission is properly postured for future threats and future opportunities.
Colonel Casey Beard, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate it, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Have a great day.